As always, I want to thank everyone again for coming in. This has been really a spectacular week, and we're thrilled with the reaction from everybody. Again, I encourage everyone to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I like to thank Archive Magazine, Photo Shelter, Pro Photo Daily, Epson, and American Photography for being by our side all along. Tonight we have the great Carol Guzy, who's going to be our keynote presenter, with 4 Pulitzer Prize winning achievements to her name, which is just really unbelievable. And we start the night off with our new friend, Mike Edrington, who is the editor of Blue Star Press, and he's going to talk to us about this new book that's coming out, Relentless Courage, Ukraine and the World at War. And he'll tell us how that came to be, where we can get it. You can, in fact, in the chat room, there'll be a link there where you can order the book. And from the looks of the people that are submitted imagery to that book, I haven't seen it yet, but I imagine it's going to be a stunning documentation of the war in Ukraine. So with that, I give you Michael Edrington. It's all yours, Michael.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I was the editor for this book. I'm not an employee of Blue Star. I work for it. In full disclosure, my daughter is editorial director and came to me. The genesis of this book goes back to Carol Guzy. We are working on her retrospective, and the publisher, the Ukraine war began. The publisher thought that maybe we could do something with Carol about the war. And to her credit, I'm one camera, one lens, one perspective, and this is much bigger than me. And it would be better if we had a more broader perspective with a number of photographers. And there were a number of freelancers over there. And that's one thing she is very passionate about, is supporting those individual photographers working on their own, that are there covering conflict on their own nickel, because they're passionate about what they do. Am I good so far, Carol?
Yeah, sorry, I'm muting because my dogs are losing their minds.
Okay. I just want to, if I get something off. Anyway, Carol and I've known each other for more than 25 years and worked together on a few things. But I wanted to, this book, its goal, it has a purpose. And Blue Star Press is a traditional publisher where we work with the artists. They have material and they want to print it, and it's marketable. And they're starting a new category of book on the level of Taschen and Fade On that many of you may be familiar with, and they're very high quality books. And we're looking at doing these probably once or twice a year. But anyway, I'll go on. With Carol, we're working on a retrospective, and it got delayed. She went to Ukraine. We decided to do this book because we felt we would have a purpose, and that is one of Blue Star's big things, is to do books that have a purpose and can and make a difference. So, and that's something I've done, and this is my 3rd book that I've been involved in. Not just with Blue Star, but with Nat Geo and some others. But at any rate, we wanted to get the scope of the war. So we started from the beginning of this part of the invasion, and that's what we thread the needle of the story as it started. The war in Ukraine actually started in 2014 with the Donbass region and all that being captured. But we started from February, and we ended about. The book didn't really end, but it leaves off, because it's a continuing story, right? And this is a book. It leaves off about a month ago when it went to press. We have 5 photographers in the book. As you know, Frank, we have Lindsay Adario, Carol Guzy, Svet, Jacqueline, Justina Maliknowicz, a fabulous Polish photographer that lives in Tbilisi, Georgia, if I'm saying that right. And just an amazing photographer in her own right. They're all amazing. There's no question, but we found her, and just absolutely great. And the fabulous Paula Bronstein. I don't want to forget her. The book will be released on the 25th of October. We're hosting the debut at Ukraine House in Washington, D.C. It's being hosted, that debut is being hosted by the ambassador, Ambassador Oksana Markarova, the Ukrainian ambassador. And it is accompanied by an exhibit that will hang for 3 weeks there. And we're also donating 600 books to the Ukraine House that will be presented through the ambassador to every member of Congress. And one of the big things, and now I get to the point of the purpose, is to sustain awareness. As the news cycle ebbs and flows, this daily terrorism, and I'm quoting Carol again, continues. And when you see the breadth of pictures that I edited out of thousands of pictures, it's horrible. It really is horrible. But what we tried to show was the destruction and toll, not only the destruction and toll, but the resilience of the Ukrainian people. And Carol has a very poignant essay in the book on the babushkas, that's Ukrainian for grandmother. These are ladies that had to stay or wanted to stay or didn't know and didn't have anywhere to go. And they're in their 70s and 80s, kind of left behind to fend for themselves in the middle of all this. And it's a very subtle, very understated moments captured by Carol, but very poignant and very heartfelt with a lot of empathy, which is testimony to her vision through the lens. And so the book I believe will be poignant. It makes the statement it's supposed to. And then most importantly, Ambassador Markarova, one of the most important things, she wrote the foreword for the book. She talks about her friend Maxim Levin, who shot for Reuters. And Maxim was literally captured by the Russians, tied up behind his hands, and they shot him in the head. And we give credit to Maxim in the book as well. And then we also have Andrei Kurkov, who is one of the most preeminent Ukrainian Russian writers there is, who wrote an essay for us and contributed. And then the preeminent David Hume Kinnerly, who, as you know, is a Pulitzer winner from the Vietnam era, but also was President Ford's personal photographer during the Ford administration. And he wrote an essay for the New York Times titled "Photographing Hell." And it was very poignant, and he agreed to give that to us and adapted it for the book because it should have been, it needed to be in a book form and more permanent. So that's the book, and Carol is in that, and part of the genesis of how we got there was I got to give Carol due credit for that. So there you go.
Right. And just one question. Michael, will there be another a follow-up book, do you think? I mean, as you're sitting here now, as the war changes moving forward, what do you think?
I would. There's going to be many books coming out of this from many different directions. I feel, but for Blue Star, knowing them as well as I do, I think there is a chance for that. Naturally, the book business is a business, and it depends on sales. We're doing very well comparative to normal photo books. For the audience that's listening, as I mentioned to you, the average photo book sells about 500 copies, believe it or not, when you go on BookScan. Some do much better than others. There's no question of that. I did a book with Geographic called Where Valor Rests, Arlington National Cemetery, and that sold well over 80,000. But it had its purpose, and there was a huge audience behind it. This book has an audience too, and if the publisher at least breaks even, and this is the reality of the book business, then they're in all likelihood they'll get behind another one, and they're not looking to make a profit at all. They have not cut corners. They've tried everything they could within their capacity as a small publisher to make it work.
Yeah, and how much is the book?
The book is $49.95. There is a special edition. If you go to www.ukrainewarbook.com, the special edition, I believe, is $129.95. It comes in its own case, and then there's an archival print. Carol, don't get upset, of a Paula Bronstein picture with a rainbow over a destroyed building. And we leave the book at the end with that picture, because it gives hope for Ukraine. It's a symbol of hope for Ukraine. Now, I do want to say one last thing, and I'm going to bring this up. It sounds like I'm in love with Carol, which I am. Okay, I acknowledge it. Okay, the thing is, the cover of the book, originally, we went through about 85 pictures on the cover. It was a struggle, and Carol was part of that. And we fell on one of her pictures, and she went to her credit. No, 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 no. It can't be this, can't be that. The picture that is on the cover was and I'm hoping I say his name right, Dmytro Kozlovsky. He's with the Azov battalion that was in the Mariupol plant that was under siege by the Russians, and he was taken prisoner of war for the last 4 or 5 months, and he was released yesterday. But one of his preeminent pictures, he did these amazing pictures, and he is a photographer, and the Ukrainian embassy gave that to us, and Carol felt that was good, and we're using his picture on the cover. So
That's great.
one of his pictures.
And so for everyone, the website link is in the chat room, so you can go there or write it down so you have it. And Michael, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on, and certainly it's a standing invitation to come back when and if the book does another version, or you do a second book. We would love to have you and talk more with you about the whole background of how you put that book together.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, and with Carol present, it's just really important that we all sustain awareness about what's happened. That's what this is all about more than anything.
You couldn't be more right. So again, we thank you. So we now have Carol Guzy, who, like I said, has won the Pulitzer Prize 4 times, and from all the variety of people that I've met in our business, everyone, to a person, says how wonderful she is, how nice she is, how mentoring she is to everyone. And her reputation is just impeccable as it relates to being a great person and a great photojournalist. So Carol, it's all yours, dear.
You want me to share the screen now?
Yep.
Okay. Let's just do this. Okay, just hi everyone, and I want to thank you, Frank, so much for keeping the light shining on this story. I mean, it's so critical right now to keep people engaged. It was a really hard decision for me to go to cover this conflict. I think it's a different animal than a lot of things I had done in the past. I have bad lungs. I can't run in a flak jacket. There were a lot of reasons I debated for quite some time whether to go or not. I didn't want someone to get hurt trying to help me if I couldn't, run. And I had an overwhelming sense of dread. It was just, I couldn't shake it. I was trying to pack, trying to decide, do I get on the plane? Do I not get on the plane? And that feeling of dread, I thought it was like for personal safety. I thought, is this going to be the hill I die on? But I feel now that it was probably this sense of evil that was about to happen, this just overwhelming evil, which I think is happening. And sorry, I have 4 dogs, so you're going to hear a lot of barking tonight, I think.
But
And
Carol,
also,
do you normally have apprehension before you go on a trip? Before you go into
normal nervousness and anxiety and indecision, but not like this. This was much, much different. And I delayed way too long in retrospect, but I couldn't, I don't know. It was hard for me to get on the plane. And then once I got there, it was hard for me to leave. I got so invested in the story. But I've always covered the humanitarian side of conflict. I'm not a war photographer. And the compromise with myself was that I would cover features, not frontline. I was going to try to stay away from the front line, do little pieces of the puzzle, there are many that define life in Ukraine right now, for the average civilian. But some stories, are epic and bigger than all of us, and I really couldn't stay away. Hope to add to the narrative, and once I got there, the spirit and the resilience of the people that just transcends such adversity. It was unbelievably compelling and inspiring. And, as I said, I just wanted to put a face to a lot of the statistics and just perhaps, look for vignettes, do something a little more personal, a little more intimate. I think viewers experience compassion fatigue like we've all seen, and it's always a challenge to keep people engaged, which is a wonderful reason to do something like this. The book, it's all a way to make people remember this is still happening. So I got on the plane, and 4.5 months later, they kind of had to pull me out to come home, and I'm hoping to go back soon. And I'd like to show you a lot of these specific packages. I did general coverage. I'm freelance now. It's a lot harder, and I send my pictures to Zuma press agency, and they distribute worldwide. But it's not like working for a newspaper like I had been my whole life. So it's a much different way to work. I self-fund, most of these stories. I mean, I worked for assignments for NPR at one point while I was there, but it was it's a different way to work. But so I tried to focus on some packages and certain stories, and one of them was was the babushkas, the ladies that stayed, that Mike was just talking about. It was the portfolio that they chose for the book. And although, I think pictures are worth 1,000 words, for me, I feel strongly that it's a marriage of photos and words that are most compelling. And I'd like to also, with the pictures, I'll read a lot of these summary captions just to perhaps make the people feel more individual. Details, I think, they cut through to a deeper understanding and perhaps evoke more empathy for the people that we photograph and document. And there's a quote that I love. It says, "Tell me I'll forget, show me I may remember, and involve me, I'll understand." And I've always tried to work like that it's much more than just a picture we're taking. So I'll move on to show babushkas. I think it's so vital. I'll read the summary. It's so vital to provide balance and show not only the harsh realities of war, but also the poetry of everyday lives. The ladies in this portrait series embody both the collective sorrow of a country in mourning and the quiet determination to stand their ground. They're beautiful, strong, delightful, elderly babushkas, an affectionate term for grandmother. And in the face of profound adversity, they're the ladies that stayed. Seniors should be enjoying their twilight years, not worried about the next airstrike, but they can't, or mostly won't, leave. They're all potential targets. Random shelling feels more like terrorism for the vulnerable. I told you I have 4 dogs. Once they start, they deal with not only the brutal existence of a war zone, but the daily struggles of aging with few available services. The babushkas are in a realm of their own. Their spirits sparkle. They all compare Russia's invasion to World War II and talk my ear off, even if I clearly don't understand a word. They wistfully show old photos of when they were young, then mention the rocket that landed in their neighborhood. Destiny here is as unpredictable as the bombs that rain from the sky. The suffering in Ukraine is epic, but the world has also seen an enduring spirit and mortal courage of a people challenged to survive. The ladies are a symbol of our shared humanity. Grace and a babushka. They're the grandmother I never knew, the beloved mother I lost. They're light in this darkness, and in a world at war on so many levels, they're hope. And I'll like to go through each individual lady, just a little bit about them. "I'm not afraid," said Tasia, 82. She didn't evacuate due to stomach cancer and has more relatives to care for her in Kyiv. After 3 surgeries, she's frail as a tiny bird, but her spirit remains intact. Once 8 lived in the apartment, but now portraits of her past line the walls where she sits alone with her memories. "I don't disturb anyone. I take care of myself," said Alexandra, 93. She doesn't want to be a burden. And a humanitarian network of residents called Angels of Kyiv deliver aid to the elderly and infirm. She sits amid disheveled surroundings, and a hip injury makes walking difficult. And she has few social services now. In times of war, there are no easy answers. And she whispers prayers, making the sign of the cross over and over and over again. Where should I go? I have nothing but Kyiv, says Alexandra, 84. A consummate hostess, she insists visitors try some scrumptious cabbage dish in her kitchen filled with well-used cooking pans and mementos. Air raid sirens are a constant reminder of war, as she pours through photo albums and proudly shows photos of herself as a child in Ukraine, in a Ukrainian costume. With a sweet smile and indomitable spirit, she literally dances as she waves farewell from the doorway of her new normal. It's very scary, but I won't leave my land, defiantly states Ludmila, 75, who has lived in a basement bunker at her apartment building since the beginning of the invasion in the heavily shelled neighborhood of Saltivka in Kharkiv. It's dark, damp, and cold, lit only by candles and flashlights, no water or electricity, but she always has a bucket filled with exquisite flowers adorning the entrance of her hovel. And her little corner of compassion has become a way station for humanitarian aid as folks stop by for a carton of potatoes and a kiss. Her collection of cats, abandoned cats, is growing, and she especially loves this elegant gray one she calls Meow Meow. She's scared and never goes farther than 20 meters from her basement. They use pigeons as a barometer. When they fly away, it's incoming and time to go underground. Though it's not deep enough to be a real bomb shelter, it provides some degree of psychological safety. I was born in Kazakhstan, and when they tested nuclear bombs, it was not as scary as now, she says. I thought the most terrifying thing was radiation. No, the most terrifying thing is war. The Russian forces were pushed to the outskirts. Daily bombardment continued. One day, as I said bye, she couldn't stop hugging me and crying, saying no one has ever paid this much attention to her. It was bittersweet blessings for us both. She has trouble sleeping and prays most of the night. Sweet dreams do not come easy as the shelling rages. She cuddles with her cats under many blankets, showing how she tucks herself in for the night. What would I say to Putin? Ludmila asks, just saying his name and my body turns to stone. No word in any language has been created to describe him. He's a creature, he's a nuclear bomb. There are only two nationalities, human and non-human. I was born in this house, and in this house I will die, says Galinya, 75. Her street in liberated Bucha is littered with burned debris and dubbed Tank Alley that looks like a scene from a movie set. Russians came to my home, she explained. They watched if anyone was hiding there. I went to the basement 3 days after the massacre. She chose to stay in a bunker as fighting raged and bodies lined the streets, some with hands tied behind their back and executed. I'm mad at them. Why did they come here? For them, humans are nothing. One killed there, next killed there. It was terrible. My soul ached for everyone. I was not so scared as so sorry, she said sadly. Evil took over. But with determination, she ended by passionately declaring, long live our state, long live our nation. We will live. You sit in the basement, it shoots, something explodes, you just want to quiet down and they start again, wept Vanda, 81, in Bucha. She lights a candle and says a prayer to the husband she lost decades ago, but still deeply misses and mourns. I had a golden man, he always felt me. For now, there's a fragile peace as Vanda tends to her garden, bursting with life again. She spoke of Putin. Does he have no family? Does he think in his head at all? She says wearily. Let him die already, and the people will not suffer. Vanda looks down at the basement bunker where she hid with other babushkas at the home of her daughter during the occupation. After liberation, they found many areas in ruins and reports of atrocities. 3 men lay dead in a garden on the corner of their street. One had stayed to take care of his dog, which was also killed. Fortunately, all their homes were spared damage, and they navigate rubble-strewn streets to receive humanitarian aid. They still gather at the only home with heat in the neighborhood and show photos of smoke from airstrikes rising over their homes. They proudly put up a Ukrainian flag for a group portrait, and now they make blueberry tea and reminisce they still have each other. Everything was scary, constant explosions, gunfire, said Tetiana, 72. She sits in her Bucha home covered in pretty pastel wallpapers. She and her husband did not leave since they had no car. When the firing started, the Russians didn't allow it, so they hid. She's not seen her daughter that lives in Crimea for 8 years, and her son is now a member of the Ukrainian Territorial Defense. She's often overcome with emotion, both tears and sweet smiles, offering strangers the warmest of hugs. She makes me borscht and bids farewell, using the only words she knows in English, I love you. And then I fall apart. The main thing is that the soul is filled with light, goodness, and love, said Nadia, 89. She had been bedridden for 3 months as the invasion began and is grateful for her son's devotion who stayed to care for her. But she says, I'm worried about the youth. I don't have much time left. Her family sang in amateur clubs and she shyly performs a moving folk ballad called Mother's Braid. And it sounds like a whisper of peace. And I'll just play this tiny little clip for y'all of her singing.
Ой, ой, чого калина, віти похилила, чи багато квіту, чи важка роса, ой, чого так рано, мама посивіла, а була ж у неї золота коса. Мамине безсоння, мамині тривоги, розстелила доля у незнану даль, за ворота вийде, стане край дороги, в коси заплітає сивіна й печаль.
These ladies are the sweetest. I'm going to mute for 1 second while I scream at my dog. Sorry.
Mary, could you tell us what that song was? You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry, I had to yell at my dog. She's out there barking like a maniac.
We'll get back to you, Mary. Wow. So,
Okay, can you hear me now?
yeah, can you just tell us what that song was?
I can't tell you all of the lyrics because they're too long, but basically it's about Kalina, which is almost a national tree in Ukraine. It's the Gilder Rose, and she's singing, why are you bowing so low? Is it because of sorrow, or is the dew too heavy? And then she translates that to a human relationship or a personal relationship. The mother is talking to her daughter, and the mother's hair has turned gray. And she said, at one time I had golden braids, no longer do I have those. And then, after that, I just don't remember because honestly, I was very overwhelmed. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Mary.
Mhm.
Oh when she
Carol,
sang that song for us, we fell apart. Even the fixer that was with me, we were all crying. It was just so tender and so pure and so beautiful. And, and outside you hear, the airstrikes in the suburbs.
yeah, and Carol, you have to go back to full screen.
Oh, yeah, I will. Okay.
Okay. So Carol, did your fixer arrange all these meetings, or were they serendipity? Can you give us a little bit of background on that?
I was just floundering around at first looking for stories, and then the fixer that I was with at the time, his friend was part of Angels of Kyiv. There were residents that just formed this network and to deliver aid to, mostly the elderly or ill. And so we originally, I did a little story on them, and I started following them around, and the network had grown. They were servicing like 1,000 people. And as I went with them to deliver aid, I just fell in love with all these little ladies. And, I just felt like they could be my mom, anyone's grandmother. How would we feel thinking, of our loved one in those situations? Because at that time it was really, it was bad in Kyiv. It was still, the fighting was raging in the suburbs, and there was still the potential of, surrounding the city. And again, then when I went to Kharkiv, I mean, they're targets, but they're so strong and they're so beautiful, and they are just determined. And I mean, personally, I wouldn't stay. It's their decision to stay. This is where they live. This is their home, and it was invaded, and by God, they're not going to leave. And it's you got to give them an A+ for courage.
Yeah. And how quickly like when you first got there, how quickly did you recognize the determination of these people?
Oh, immediately. I mean, it's like it's in the air. I mean,
Is that right?
and the more time I spent and the more people, at least my experiences there, because I wasn't covering the front line. I wasn't covering the battlefield and soldiers. I was literally with civilians doing, the whole time. And but everyone I met was just so gracious. And so, I mean, everyone to a fault, was so convinced that Ukraine was going to win, even in the beginning when it was not it was not looking that way. I mean, the tide has like turned dramatically from what no one expected this little country could do against the force of, Russian power. It's like David and Goliath. But the sweetness of soul, there's just this eloquence and, generosity and just kindness across the board with everyone I met. And honestly, it's, just the way they treat their pets. I have never been in a country, I rescue animals everywhere. I've never been in a country that I didn't feel the need to rescue an animal. That's how much they take care of their own, including the animals and the pets and the strays. And that just says something a lot to me about the heart of a nation,
And what do you think? I mean, you capture so much intimacy in these images. Is it from being there for a while, or is that also an immediate part of the relationship? Or
a lot of it, well, it depends. I mean, I spent a lot of time with like Ludmila in Kharkiv and the babushkas in Bucha, a lot more time than I spent with maybe the ladies in Kyiv. They started out just being portraits. I was just going to do one portrait of each lady as a portrait series. And then, there's so much to cover in Ukraine and only so much time, but there are certain people I went back to a lot. And then I fell in love with, and they literally became like my Grammy.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So should we move on?
Yes, sure.
But feel free to ask questions anytime, because I get on a roll and then I'll just,
No, what I think I'll do is let you do your packages, and then check the chat room and then ask a few questions afterwards.
Okay. All right.
Your narrative is so calming and so beautiful. It's engaging all of us. I think everyone likes that.
Well, I hope so. Like I said, I think the words are important. Those little details of all those ladies, and their quotes, when it's someone's own words, not ours as journalists, but their words from their mouth. I think that I find that most compelling. So I always try to add that.
And you have a special hello from Tim Fadek and Ken.
Tell them hi. We have a whole group of Ukraine photographers now that we have a bond. And from forever, I've worked with these guys.
Yes.
So, war is death. This was the beginning. Investigations. This is a package on the war crimes investigations. It's ongoing, obviously, and chilling. And the latest is a mass grave now in Izium. I think it's really vital to document for both history and to counter misinformation. This was what appeared to be a family. There was a woman and child in this pile of bodies. It's pretty horrendous. Investigators and volunteers began the grim work of chronicling civilian deaths and assessing evidence of war crimes in Bucha, liberated from invading Russian forces in the suburbs of Kyiv, where atrocities were reported. Bodies lie in the mass graves, with workers using a crane to lift them out. And families were desperately watching for their loved ones as this whole process was happening. It took about a week or two. Over 320 bodies had been recovered. This man saw them pull his brother out at this precise moment. Echoes of never again are spoken after the Holocaust. But sadly, it never really means never. I feel like we're all witnessing ethnic cleansing yet again. The eyes of death stare from a body bag, begging the question, what was his final sight before life ended? At the nearby morgue, every bag was opened and painstakingly chronicled. Kennerly, in an op-ed in the New York Times, David Kennerly talks about how we put graphic warnings on images that disturb, but it's far more horrific for the people living this brutal invasion than anyone simply viewing them from afar. And isn't that what society should find most intolerable? Not the pictures that remind us of it. He implores us not to look away. I think at times our role is also to amplify those voices of justice. Body collectors traveled in vehicles that were marked with 200. The wreckage of war was everywhere as bodies were pulled from streets, homes, elderly facilities, and makeshift graves everywhere. Evidence was collected. Identities only sometimes revealed. Every day, on and on and on, more bodies were pulled. With the lack of food and heat and medicine, the vulnerable were also victims of war. These bodies of the elderly were found at a pool, which was the coolest part of the nursing home where they put them because they couldn't bury them. It was too dangerous. And then it got more personal. I don't want to live with hate in my heart, said Svetlana about the Russian soldiers that killed her husband as police exhumed his body from their backyard in Irpin. Kostya, father of her child, love of her life, was taken away in an instant by a sniper's bullet as he was walking through a park to deliver food to an elderly neighbor. When his brother rushed to help, he too was gunned down. Nicknamed Yasny, meaning light, his body lay for 3 days since she and son Sergei were afraid to go out, but later put white ribbons on their sleeves and found the strength to search. 2 weeks later, she sat as smoke from a teapot enveloped them for a lengthy interview with police. Kostya especially loved animals and rescued them. And one of his dogs poignantly walked in circles around and around and around his empty grave. Svetlana wistfully spoke of the husband who wooed her. She did not immediately respond to his courtship, was not even impressed with the huge bouquet of roses. He danced beautifully and always had a lot of women around him, but he was resolute that she was the one, and after a week of meeting, he proposed. She had problems with her retina, fearing she could lose her sight, but Kostya always repeated, "Do not be afraid. I will be your eyes." They're finally able to give him a proper burial at Irpin Cemetery. They chose a blue coffin because it was free and have some small peace knowing he is at a final resting place, but feel his soul is really not there. With a bittersweet smile, she looked up and said, he's in the sky.
And Carol, how long did you spend with her?
I went back a number of times. I met them. We were following the police, doing the investigations and exhuming the bodies. And she was one of the families, and I was just so enchanted by her, again, her grace and her strength, and her son, and how incredible they were to, the police and to us after going through such a nightmare. And we went back a few times. We went with the boy, well, he was 30 years old, with Sergei. They had taken him to a faraway morgue because all the morgues in the area were full, and he wanted to go through so much red tape. So we went with him a number of times trying to retrieve the body, and obviously came back for the funeral. And she had us in the house afterwards, and made us tea and borscht, I think it was. And I think sometimes it's cathartic for people to tell their story, to have someone interested. Everyone wants this documented. I mean, this happened in Kosovo too. People want it documented. They want these atrocities on the record. And so they welcome us mostly with open arms to do this at a time of such sorrow, and then thank us. They thank us for doing our job. Which,
yeah. And Carol, can you speak to what is it? I mean, can you put the camera on yourself? What is it about you, your colleagues, that gets those people to trust you, to let you in, right? I mean, there's a space in between all this that you guys have stepped into. Do you know what that is?
I don't know. Like I said, it just seems to be an inherent trust that we are there to do something that's very vital and very important and very needed. It seems to be across the board in the country. I mean, but in general, I think we all share, the same emotions. I mean, wherever you go, I think if you show people respect, and they have to get beyond the camera. I mean, we walk in with cameras, it changes situations. That's why I'm such a firm believer in spending time with people as much as you can, as much as is humanly possible. With stories that are not, breaking news, obviously, because that's the only way you get genuine, authentic moments. It's the only, they have to trust you. They have to move beyond the camera and decide that you are there to do what you say, to tell their story. It's their narrative, and we're not trying to take pictures. We're trying to give something from the world to the world, which is their story. And I think, eventually people, fortunately, they trust, and they shockingly open their lives to us over and over and over again. I've been doing this for 40 years, and it always amazes me the courage people have to open their hearts to the camera and just say, yes, tell my story.
And that really has to be conveyed through your fixer,
right,
to those people. So, I mean, is there sort of a screening policy that you have with the fixer, that that they're conveying, where your heart lies?
Oh, fixers are invaluable. I can't say enough about, we could not do these stories without fixers. They translate, they know the local terrain, the culture. I mean, it's just impossible for me to work without a good fixer. I mean, one fixer I had was afraid to even ask people their names, and he didn't last very long. But Dima and I worked.
So you can tell that. You can tell that, Carol.
Yeah. I mean, that was unusual, but it was not going to work. Right. Much less get any more information. He was just afraid to talk to people. So, but Dima and I worked together for months, and he was amazing. He was really smart and really tender and caring, and people knew that, so he was definitely a good link between myself and everyone else.
The words tender and caring are on the top of the list, right? I mean, he can convey who you are to somebody else. I mean, that really is an intense space for him to find himself as well, right?
Right. And it's his country. I mean, he honestly cares about the people, and he wants these stories told. And I think he realizes the importance of what we're doing and the work he's doing to help us do the stories. So You know, it's a network. It takes a village to do these stories. It's never just a photographer, just a reporter.
Okay.
All right. And this was another family. Lord, I want to die too. I don't have the strength to live with this torment, wept Olga, as she and husband Vladimir watched the body of their son, Vitaly, exhumed from a makeshift grave in the garden of their home in Malarohan. In their garage, a coffin sat for months, ready to receive him. The village was occupied by Russians, she said. Everyone was afraid and didn't want to dig a pit in the cemetery. There were unexploded ordnance or mines too. That's why we buried him like a dog in the yard. He had left the relative safety of Kharkiv, where they had evacuated to deliver humanitarian aid, and a Russian tank fired at the civilian car from a close distance, and he was torn to pieces. They gathered their boy in sacks. All that was left was a bag of unrecognizable slivers and a mother's pain that was excruciatingly primal and unrelenting. She just couldn't stop crying. They went with investigators to the scorched car where their boy perished, and in a heartbreaking scene, Olga climbed inside, combing through ashes as police recovered bone fragments. She then searched a field for any shards of evidence in her son's murder. Even when they warned of mines, she kept walking through the grasses, seeking justice. The church says that God takes the best, that my son is now in paradise because he helped people, he delivered medicine and food, but it doesn't help me. She pushed the prosecutor to rush forensics to finally give her baby a proper burial. It's not right. I shouldn't bury him. He should bury me. She wept fiercely as she turned to talk to her son in the coffin on the long ride from work to cemetery. Why didn't you listen to me? She cries. You went to Rohan Dammit. How can I live without you? After the funeral, attended by only the grieving parents and 2 grave diggers, she feels no peace. They say time heals, said Olga wearily, but no, the further, the harder. And then, it seems what everyone does, they turn for that final look. And in a garden of a home in Bucha were 3 bodies shot in the head. One was Sergei's wife, who came to gather pets that had survived. Neighbors said he remained there to care for his dogs, and in a wheelbarrow nearby, the body of one had been shot. As humans mourn, that dog follows the body of his person to a morgue van. Animals grieve too. Vadim's wife was killed by shelling in Malarohan. He grasps an old family photo that his son found in the rubble. They soon would have celebrated 45 years of marriage. The body of Marina, 32, was exhumed by her friend, Lesya, in a backyard in Bucha. She didn't wake up one day, and Lesya begged for permission from Russian troops to bury her. There were 3 other people buried in this yard, all shot in the eye. She left behind 3 children. Here, a Russian soldier sits in a glass enclosure with reflections of Ukrainians and media at a war crimes trial in Chernihiv. He's accused of violating the laws and customs of war. He was the operator gunner of a tank and received an order to shoot at a residential apartment building using a high explosive fragmentation projectile. Witnesses testified, and he has admitted guilt and repented. Likely one of the countless trials that will take place for years. And the question is, will Putin face his accusers?
So Carol, I mean, all those funerals, and unearthing of bodies, the intimacy of that, what does that do to you? You as
Oh,
just, a photographer, human being.
oh my God. I always say we're not walking cameras, we're not robots, we're human first. Of course, what you witness is going to change you. I mean, you're literally, you're never going to walk in someone's shoes, and it's this huge responsibility and challenge to be able to document and somehow translate what they're going through, because it's not literally your life, but you're walking their path for a certain amount of time as you're doing this. And I'm sensitive anyway, and I've always said I have a ton of empathy, which helps make compelling pictures, but it also makes your heart break a million times harder. And I cry all the time. I mean, these people come up and they thank me for doing my job. They hug me, and I feel like so humbled that they could even, think of, this stranger with a camera and, my comfort when they're going through such hell. And, it brings me to my knees. And it's usually not the bodies, because we photograph a lot of bodies and rubble and destruction and death. It's the survivors. It's those little moments of beauty and gestures of tenderness that just bring me right to my knees every single time. And in Ukraine, it's constant. It's every experience I had there. It's been, I'm so humbled to know these people. And it makes it harder actually to cover this war, because you grow to love the people that you're spending this horrible time with. And you have to see so much suffering that it's even harder to document it, because they are beautiful people.
And when you're leaving and you're coming back home, how do you leave that back?
Oh,
How do
you never leave it. I think it just changes you forever in some way. It changes your soul, every experience you have. And I think it's, it enriches our lives in many ways, but it also tears you apart. I mean, it's really, I've been doing this a long time, and I've had a lot of meltdowns, just because I am really emotional and I let things get to me. And I've learned coping mechanisms better. I'm able to just at least move on in a more healthy way now. But it's, I dream about them. I think about them constantly. And I'm always asking my fixer to, call Ludmilla and see if she's still in that damn bunker. We got to get her out of there.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll go visit everyone when I go back. There's certain people that you feel closer to because of that shared experience, I think.
And are they the proximity that they're all pretty close to each other? These towns?
I spent a lot of time in Irpin and Bucha, which is near Kyiv. It's the suburbs that was occupied, and really the fighting was really bad initially, and then when they were liberated, it became relatively peaceful. And then I spent an awful lot of time in Kharkiv and a little Dnipro. Yeah, you take trains, you take an overnight train, and you can get just about anywhere in Ukraine. So, but yeah, after being called an enemy of the people in the US, and just feeling vilified and hated, as a journalist, it's refreshing to actually have someone say thank you for doing what you're doing. It's important. So
Yeah, that's an interesting, which is another 2-hour discussion, to be called the enemy in your own country.
yeah.
And then going somewhere else and you're heroic.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about heroic, but at least appreciate it. So yeah. I'll just click through. I mean, the endless scenes of mourning. I mean, I don't have a lot of words to say about this. What can you say about such palpable sorrow everywhere? It was in the air everywhere you turned. It was mothers bidding their son goodbye, soldiers' funerals, civilian funerals, just endless every day. And it was really important to people to hold the funerals. I mean, it was so hard for folks like at the mass grave, for everyone that had to hastily bury someone in a backyard when the Russians were occupying their towns. I mean, it was so important to finally give them this proper burial, and have that final resting place for them. I think that's kind of universal. And it was cities and villages. No one was exempt.
Yeah, we spoke about it before. There's always these array of flowers to make it so beautiful.
Yeah, they love flowers. They love flowers. They love to give flowers. They pick me flowers all the time and handed me flowers. They would come up after a service many times. I mean, it's tradition to give like a bag of candy. I think it's to remember the person that's passed, and they never fail. They'd come and always give me a bag too. I'd be on the outside of the, trying to stand back with a long lens, and they'd make an effort to come to me to make me feel included too. It was really touching.
There's a practical piece that they really recognize the value of what you and your colleagues are doing, right? I mean, there's that type of an appreciation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're savvy. I mean, they understand, I think, the power of journalism, especially photography, in a situation like this. I mean, there's misinformation is rampant, propaganda, and just for history. I mean, to document this is so critical. And it's not just the war crimes evidence that you see. It's also, the profound sorrow of an entire country on so many levels. I mean, they've lost loved ones, their homes, their livelihoods. A lot of them had to flee, on trains, buses, cars, however they could get out, and they're now refugees in a foreign country. This has just touched everyone's life in Ukraine in some way, and in some sad way, mostly. But again, I mean, the strength and resilience is just astonishing. I've seen that spirit in other countries, but it's pretty phenomenal in Ukraine. And we can move on to this. It's an essay on still life. I felt this surreal stillness as I walked through bombed out buildings, and I could almost feel the ghosts of lives that once lived there. And I wrote these words to try to articulate the feeling, not so much journalistic facts and figures or captions. Called it What Remains. Eerie paintings and shades of burnt sienna, remnants of everyday life, frozen in a macabre stillness. At the precise moment, time stopped when Russian bombs rained down on dwellings in liberated towns of Irpin and Borodyanka. Baby cribs and wheelchairs. The kitchen table still holds food left uneaten. What were they cooking that last day of normal? Twisted metal, empty chairs, melted microwaves. Jarred cameras that once held tender family photos, now fading. Coffee cup sits on a table near a recliner, singed and flaking. Precious mementos reduced to dust. Yet it was exquisite light kissing the scorched palate. Lives interrupted or extinguished. It's too painful to ponder what the power of these weapons of destruction do to human flesh at the point of impact. Civilian things, not the stuff of combatants. Humanity's hopes, dreams, loves. In war, they're merely termed collateral damage. Popular cat cafe is in ruins, once the scene of camaraderie and conversation over cappuccinos. Broken glass becomes a metaphor for shattered lives. Survivors saved from the bombardment by the fickle destiny of circumstance visit in bittersweet homecomings to pick through pieces of their former lives. Others never return. Their life's breath, now a faded memory, among precious keepsakes, scattered in living rooms of ash. I was hoping that this would be a unique view of the tragic legacy of war. I think on every story, compassion fatigue sets in and the world community turns away from endless images of death and destruction. And I was hoping to engage viewers on a more personal level. I mean, they're familiar things, echoes of every day. We all have kitchens where we cook for family and friends and bedrooms where we dream. But when a story drags on, there's waning interest. Although it's just as horrific for the people living it, they can't turn the page when they don't like the story and they're stuck in reality long after the headlines are gone. Thankfully, NPR published this package recently. I was thrilled to have it seen. I think it's always a challenge to look for something just a little bit different than what people are used to seeing to raise awareness, get their attention again.
Carol?
Yeah.
These still life images, were they pieces that you've taken along the way, or now you decided to do still life images? You know, you know what I mean?
Well, I was walking through a lot of these burned out buildings, you know. I mean, we're just exploring all the time in villages, in the towns and cities. And, you know, I was just struck by all these little things. It was just, I mean, chills would go up my spine because they were so familiar, but it was like walking around a movie set. It was so familiar things in such a bizarre setting. And I started taking pictures kind of with it back in the back of my mind. I wanted to do a little photo essay. And then by the end of the trip, I devoted a number of days to go back and photograph as much as I could of these buildings.
Yeah.
And in a lot of them, I also did stories. There were a lot of people that were coming back to get what was left of their lives. So I did little vignettes of them trying to salvage.
Those still lifes are phenomenal. I mean, really, really, really.
It's like looking at a painting, a bizarre, horrific, beautiful in some way painting. It's really, I don't know. I just found it so engaging and compelling and sad and profound on many levels, mostly because we can all relate. I mean, we all, like I said, we all have kitchens. We all have these little things in our lives. And you can imagine if it was your home and it was just totally reduced, you know, to rubble, and what the meaningful things are most are, you know, other than lives and pets, it's photos. People always look for their photographs first. And the little meaningful things that you have around you, you know, sentimental stuff that just gets blown up or melted. So, yeah. And I did another set actually on schools. I'll just run through these quickly.
No, you don't. So,
I
yeah,
don't know if I'm on time, so I'm trying to.
no. Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't want to hear the word quickly.
Okay. Get cut off at a certain point.
No, there is no time limit, Carol. There is.
All right, I'll try to speak a little bit slower. I get nervous, I talk fast.
No, you're doing perfect.
So this is it's a different feeling to these pictures, but the same concept. A somber start to the school year began in Ukraine on September 1st. And a portrait of Zelensky hangs untouched on a wall of a shattered classroom, and a metaphor of resilience. But in this genocide of culture and learning, over 2,000 educational institutions and 500 cultural sites have been damaged or destroyed by shelling, according to the Defense Ministry. Now the curriculum includes instructions on emergency measures, and all buildings are required to have bomb shelters. Ordnance lay in empty hallways amid shrapnel-riddled walls, scorched books, and melted teaching tools. The absence of children's laughter leaves a surreal silence. Libraries are decimated. At one vocational school, canisters of film negatives lay in water used to douse the flames. And ironically, they held images of Russian leaders being studied in that class. In their new normal, residents play volleyball amid the ruins. Trophies litter floors, and a ghostly mural of a basketball player watches over a gym turned to ash. An elementary school serves as a shelter for babushkas, and Svetlana, 75, declared Putin is the second Hitler. Here, the principal wipes away dirt from a mural created by student dancers that form the word peace in Russian. When kids would usually run gleefully through halls on the last day before summer vacation, a mortar attack obliterated a school in Kharkiv. The body of a woman lies on a staircase, frozen in a still life of her own at the moment of death, just days after returning from the safety of evacuation. For civilians in Ukraine, daily life is a front line. Yeah, they hit schools. Oh my God. Every day they're hitting another school. And to be fair, I mean, they do house military many times, are housed in institutions like schools, but in general, not 2,000 of them.
And nobody was in those schools trying to get them back up into shape or anything like that. That's
Well, not when I was there. I mean, eventually, and I don't know if they ever, I mean, they'll go in and clean things out. They're very clean too in Ukraine. I mean, it's like shocking how fast people, after there's a shelling, people are right there trying to clean up the debris. But school started, and I saw some pictures that they were holding classes underground for a lot of students. So I don't know, I'd be hesitant to send my kid back to school considering there's such targets. I mean, it's just like I said, every day another school is getting hit. This is another, what I thought was just going to be a little feature story on a zoo that they were evacuating near Kharkiv. When the war started, I got down on my knees and told the animals, I'm sorry, they don't understand, said Svetlana, who's vice director of Echo Park Zoo near Kharkiv, standing by a destroyed bus where she personally witnessed the driver killed. Staff and volunteers made heroic efforts to evacuate animals from the park that was shelled repeatedly for months. At least 5 employees were killed, including 2 found shot to death at close range. The child was only 24. We found him without a face, explains Svetlana. Over 100 animals perished, including some chimpanzees, orangutans, and kangaroos that they said died of heart failure from fear. After every trip to the park, I said I would not go again, said Svetlana, but the animals were waiting for us. They were our family. And when you see the broken cages, destruction, the monkeys hiding in the toilet, it's devastating. She said they were forced often to work without sedatives. The orangutans seemed to understand. Like a mother, I told them, give me your hand. And they left. In spite of the risk, all the workers said they were there until the end, and they were able to get some 5,000 animals out. But Svetlana this was an ostrich rescue that we abandoned as it was shelled, and they were rushing off. And the next day, Svetlana was also there when a 15-year-old volunteer, Denny, was mortally wounded. His parents were caretakers, and he frequently helped them feed the animals. There was a second explosion. We heard a child crying outside, and I got hysterical because I'm a veterinarian. I realized that this is a nightmare. She knew the wounds were fatal. That's Denny. He only survived about less than half an hour after that. Others were also injured by shrapnel that day. And then 2 Russian soldiers were brought to the hospital by coincidence, and distraught zoo staff screamed at them in anguish after learning of the boy's death. His mom hysterically hit her husband, blaming him for bringing the boy that day as soon as she heard that he had died. The emotions were raw. One soldier was a Ukrainian separatist fighting for Russia, adding a layer of betrayal to their profound sorrow. And here Vitaly, father of the boy, took off the soldier's blindfold to show his son's blood still on his hands in a painfully poignant confrontation of war and innocence. They plan to rebuild the zoo. And if anyone's looking for another outlet to help, I mean, they're doing fundraising efforts right now. And I'll click through some of these pictures. It's disconcerting, especially in Ukraine, to see the contrast of normality amid wreckage of each morning's shelling, especially in Kharkiv. And on this day, as soldiers were welcoming home their loves with flowers, civilians nearby were being torn apart by indiscriminate shelling. Just in a park. It's random. People standing at a bus stop. Why are we alive and my son is dead, wept Nadia, 80 years old, in Irpin as they returned to the rubble of their home, where she once loved to garden and where her son perished. On this day, it was Mother's Day. Yet as I was leaving, they picked me flowers. Residents returned to pick up the pieces of shattered lives. Farmers returned to a land littered with dead animals.
Okay.
And then the shit continues as cluster bombs fall on homes and parks where elderly die playing dominoes that you'll see at the end of these pictures. And if you want, I mean, we could do questions or chat. I can just scroll through some pictures or.
Yeah, I see that our friend David Kernley has come into the house.
Uh-oh. Well, I mentioned him. He did that op-ed piece, that amazing piece for the New York Times that, you know, cautioned us all not to look away. And I think that's if there's one thing I could leave with people from this, is to please not look away, to please keep Ukraine in your thoughts. And
Yeah. So what are your plans, Carol? Do you plan on going back anytime soon? You know,
yeah, I'm supposed to go back October. I was supposed to be there now. I had stayed for an awards dinner, and I would be back there right now, but I changed my mind for a few different personal commitments, and also my pet sitters were not in town, so I'm on hold waiting, but my heart is there. I really, really want to go back.
what is this scene? Is this in town?
It's in Kharkiv. It's distributing food, aid. I mean, people that came back, a lot of them didn't have water or electricity on in their buildings yet. They had no way to cook. And, you know, these angels, I mean, first responders and, you know, volunteers are angels in my mind. I mean, they just risk their lives a lot of times to deliver, you know, food and supplies and, you know, evacuate people from the front line. I mean, they're just incredible. Wow. It's so many people in Ukraine, and it's just normal residents that they didn't just take up arms, but the people that were left, they volunteer. I mean, they're not just sitting back and trying to, you know.
Those were Molotov cocktails?
Yeah, they were Molotov cocktails. Yeah. That was at that abandoned apartment, well, the bombed out apartment building, and that's what they were doing. I mean, everyone was trying, you know, to like I said, it was David and Goliath. It was just normal people, you know, people that were not, you know, military, that, you know, did whatever they can to help the effort to save their country. And in a way, you know, save democracy. I mean, it's, you try to be objective as a journalist, but, you know, from the perspective I saw, that from the civilian perspective, this is a nightmare that they're living through, that they didn't ask for, they didn't do anything, they were invaded.
Yeah, I mean, that someone, Robert just put that in the chat room, just all of this from one unhinged person, right? I mean, it's.
Yeah, it just, I don't understand how Putin, how the soldiers, how anyone can continue to do this. I feel like we're, you know, in a way, we're all witnessing our Holocaust. I mean, this is a slow genocide of a people. It's ethnic cleansing. It's terrorism in many ways. It's not just soldiers on a battlefield. It's much larger than that. And I don't know what the answer is to stop it, but it's just, we're going to look back and we're going to feel, I think, a lot of sorrow that this was allowed to continue. And
Yeah,
I could go on and just show other pictures of, you know, and scroll through them, or we can stop and chat. It's up to you. This is just Exodus.
No, yeah, just keep on doing that. That's great, Carol.
We can chat, because there's no captions. This is just generic, you know, general coverage of, you know, I mean, a massive millions of people who were uprooted and, you know, on the move. The sad part is that so many people fled to safety, and as soon as they felt it was safe to come back, especially to Kharkiv, like that lady who died in the basement, you know, the shelling would take them out again. And,
Right. Yeah,
no, I just don't buy it. I'm not a military person, but, you know, you don't drop so many bombs by mistake on civilian areas that were clearly, there was clearly no front line, no military, over and over and over again. I mean, it's horrendous.
Yeah, as you can imagine, in the chat room, I mean, everyone is stunned by this collection of work. It's just absolutely staggering. Absolutely staggering. It's
Well, I feel like, you know, I mean, my colleagues who are far braver than I, and you know, did a lot of frontline coverage where it was much more desperate, and more dangerous. They've made so many iconic images, and you know, it's humbling. I'm so proud of them. You know, that we've all done collectively as a, you know, journalist society, you know, to cover this war. And this is just my little piece of the puzzle, but I feel like it's all important. It's all history. Every image that's made, every, you know, word that's written is so important. And there's not even enough of us to cover this country, I don't think, right now. And all the little stories that are happening everywhere that really should be told.
yeah, but I have to say, you know, doing something like this over the course of the week, you know, for us who sit home and, you know, in our comfortable spaces, you yourself on the top of the list, you know, and all the journalists who presented this week and the previous week really has managed to, certainly for myself, feel you really get an understanding of this, the desperation, the courageousness, the heroicness of the people, you know, the volunteering, you know, every aspect of it, the suffering, you know, that, you know, it's just staggering. I mean, what you and your colleagues cover, and bringing it so vividly and rivetingly home is so important to us. You know, it really is. And the book that Michael has edited, you know, will be another testament to all of that. You know, it's an interesting thing also, you know, we could tell some of the shots you certainly with Ken for a while, but, you know, different, you know, Can you speak a little bit to that, Carol? You know, traveling with a number of photographers. Yeah, how do we make sure that I'm getting a different view than yours?
Yeah, it's always astonishing to me, no matter where you are. You could be on Capitol Hill, with 20 photographers elbow to elbow, and you're all going to look at the same scene and make a different picture. It's the most amazing, wonderful, magical thing about being a photographer is that we all have a little bit different eye, and we all bring a little different piece of that puzzle with our vision. It's really unique and wonderful for each of us. And it's like I said, the same scene we can look at and see something totally different. But 1 second, I got to shut my dog up. 1 second, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
we don't even hear it. I have to tell you, Carol.
No,
that-
but she's outside barking, and my neighbors are going
Okay.
to. 1 second, just 1 second.
Okay. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll get Carol to speak. I don't see if David is still there. Yeah. Any questions, comments? That is just an incredible body of work. Oh my God, that is just something else. Jay, can we get?
I fear that it is just the beginning of what Putin has in mind with the recruitment of a new soldiers to come in and continue this insanity. It's numbing.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. Who knows what the next 6 months ago is going to be like? Yeah.
As bad as things are, the most frightening thing is it can be so much worse. He hasn't yet used chemical weapons, tactical nukes. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, he can cause an accident or an accident could just happen at the nuclear plant. I mean, there's so many more ways this could get worse. And that's what I'm hoping and praying won't happen.
Yeah, Carol, you can stop sharing
Okay.
if you want.
How do I do that? Okay.
No, you're good now, Carol.
Oh, okay. All right. There you go.
You're absolutely good.
Okay.
When you go back, do you have a timetable in your head? Do you have other ideas, like the way you came up with still lifes and portraits of families and this and that? Like, do you go back with somewhat of a list of things you want to cover? And that leads you on your way?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to get too many preconceived ideas, because then I think we're not open to surprises and the actual stories that are happening when you're kind of searching for something else. But yeah, it's good to have some kind of a plan. I mean, I have a few stories I want to go back and work on. If I'd be there now, I would be doing the liberated towns. I'd be in Izium, near Kharkiv, doing more, war crimes investigations, because I feel like that's so important and vital and critical. It's possibly the most important pictures we take. There's other stories that I want to do, but again, I kind of stumble into things, and it's more a feeling of, oh, this family's amazing. I'm gonna spend time with them.
Yeah, I mean, is that a new somewhat of a new category, in that I'm documenting this and I'm documenting war crimes in a real way, that this will become evidence?
Well, we're not investigators, we're journalists. But what you're witnessing. I mean, we're not just there to regurgitate, visual facts. We're there to provide some kind of perspective, and your photos are hopefully authentic and truthful, and the reality of the situation, and it is what it is.
Right. But is there a moral conviction around that?
I feel that it's important to document it. Yes, for history, for justice, for these people that have suffered and died. Yes, I feel like we all should be taking these pictures, knowing that they will probably be evidence someday.
Great. Great. Does anyone have any other questions or comments? You can, just unmute yourself and speak up and, so that you can get any question answered. So you go back, and, do you immediately try to recreate your team, get your fixer back who was so wonderful and, do you try to, find, do that or do you get somebody new? Like, how does that work for you? The practical piece of this.
Oh, I mean, no, Dima already messaged me as soon as this awards dinner was over saying, okay, are you coming? I'm like, well, I told you I probably had to delay and now I really can't leave because of my pet sitter problem. And so he's kind of on hold, but yeah, he said he'll be there for me whenever I get back.
Yeah.
He's my team, he's now my friend. I mean, I've had fixers from so many countries who have become my friends. I mean, they're just, they have your back and they, he said one time he made some remark that he does 6 jobs: driver, producer, blah, 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 translator, and shrink, because he has to deal with all our emotional craziness too.
Yeah, and
at one time, Paula Bronstein and I were traveling together for a couple of weeks with Dima, so we drove him completely nuts. He dealt with it.
Paula wanted to do it, and then her schedule didn't allow it. But probably the next week that we do this,
she's there right now. I just talked to her.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we were thinking about pre-recording like we did with Heidi, but next time, for sure she'll be in. So Carol, I cannot thank you enough for for doing this, what you do, how you do it. I mean, an eloquence that is really unmatched. You're bringing everything into a context, and your storytelling and your writing is just great. So how, when you're starting to write, are you writing like each evening what these images are, or you can do it later on? How does that work for you?
If it's like a package like the still life, that was later on. I would jot down thoughts. I mean, one of my greatest regrets in life, professionally, is that I didn't keep a journal. All the things we witness, and if you forget all the little things over the course of decades of doing this, and I really wish I would have done that. So I try to do it a little bit more, just my feelings. Like when I was going through those buildings, on my phone, I just write down words, to prompt my memory of the feeling, things like that. But in general, I send to Zuma every day. So I'll do caption information, or, I'll package on the families, because I'll know that it's not going to be a daily, like the family at the farm that exhumed her husband.
Right.
I knew that I was going to do that as a package. So I waited till that was done to write the little.
And do you think?
And it was really important to me too. And Dima is great about that, because he has such patience to talk to these people endlessly and all these questions and get all these little details, about her husband, and and then he has to translate it after. So it's a lot of work for him, but it's invaluable, I think, to make.
Yeah, no, you've really shined the light on the fixer tonight, which is something we know. But for you're shouting it out in such a way that he, like you say, getting these intimacies of different families is great.
And it wasn't only Dima. I want to have a shout out to Misha and Stefan, if they ever watch this, because they were amazing too. There's a lot of people that work with us and help us.
I bet. And at any point, are you thinking, I could do my own book, or I'd like to do a book? I mean, how does that work for you?
Well, it's kind of in the works. I mean, Mike mentioned that we're doing a retrospective, supposedly. I was supposed to be working on that all year, and now I'm in Ukraine most of this year, so that's going to be delayed. It's been my dream. I've never done a book in my life, and I feel like I've been a newspaper photographer most of my career, except for now freelance, and that's, it's fleeting. It's a daily, picture. I mean, a lot of stuff we did so many photo galleries, and now they're just gone. You can't even find them anymore. So to me, a book is like a legacy. It's leaving behind something. And it's been a dream. So I'm really hoping that I could at least do this one book before I die.
That's a long time off, but so that would be so that's a goal, right? To do the book. Great. Well, like I said, I can't thank you enough. I know this, these things are not easy, and your time is pulled from every different direction, and there's a lot of demand on you. So, from our audience, thank you so very much.
Thank you for doing this. Honestly, thank you, because it's really important. It's so important to keep the light shining on this story.
Yeah, no, we'll keep on doing that, and Mike as well. You guys have a platform. Anytime you want to come back and show us work, we would love to have you.
Thanks, Frank. Carol's book, her retrospective will get done. That's going to happen. So
Fair enough. All right, so that's on
When is the question.
yeah, well, we'll get there. It's
Great.
going to get done.
Great. Mike, and thank you very much for putting that book together and telling us all about it. And again, if there's something else you'd like to do on this platform, we'd love to have you with some of the other photographers. Know that that's a standing invitation.
Well, thank you very much. I do want to say, there's Ken Cedino, he contributed. We couldn't have done it without freelancers like him. So thank you, Ken. I know you're there. Also, I want to shout out to David Kennerly, who's been an immeasurable help in the process, but we would not have been able to do it without the photographers. I mean, that's who it's all about, and the people whose stories they covered. That's it.
Great. So Carol, as I like to do, you get the final word tonight.
I guess the final words I would say is don't look away.
Okay. That about says it all. So I want to thank everyone for coming in to see and hear Carol and Mike. We appreciate everyone coming. We appreciate you guys presenting, and we'll do it again. And we'll see you on the road. Carol, be careful. Travel with safety.